Mr. Lamborn, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, Mr. Lamborn.
Yes,
You're
can
not
you hear me?
limited to 5 minutes.
From what I heard.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
And Mike
Yes.
Johnson, you may want to mute Mike Johnson. Okay, General or Admiral, whoever wants to take this question. Obviously, there were some real deficiencies with the training regime that was in place that were not followed or should have been followed, shouldn't have been in place, but also when it comes to the equipment and the AAVs in particular. It seemed like it was a disaster waiting to happen. These AAVs were taking on water, the bilge pumps weren't able to keep up, the batteries weren't sufficient. There were a lot of specific things that were wrong with these AAVs, and a subsequent inspection found that many of them failed. I believe the majority, once they were inspected, failed inspection and should not be used. So what will the Marine Corps do with the need for better AAVs in the future? This is something our subcommittee, besides the training aspect, is going to want to look at. So what's the best insight you can give us on how to get to a better state where we have AAVs that are good for training and actually good in actual conflict? Thank you.
Congressman, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to General Olson. But let me be clear. The AAV platoon should have received vehicles in a higher state of material readiness than they did. These are old vehicles, but they are broadly well understood of what is required to keep them up. Although we have learned some things since the mishap that General Olson has will describe. But we will, I assure you, we will fully resource any requirement to keep this vehicle in a high state of material readiness until its sundown in 2026. Let me turn it over to General Olson for any additional fill-in.
Ranking Member Lamborn, you are 100% correct, sir. These vehicles were delivered in, as the investigating officer notes, horrible condition. 12 of the 13 were inoperable on the 20th of April. All should have been ready for both land and water operations. The AAV platoon mechanics, augmented by 3 mechanics from the parent battalion, did return them to condition code for land operations in time for a land-only mechanized raid course. By the time they got on board ship, they had been returned to what we thought was waterborne capable. What we found in our subsequent inspections after a safety of use message came out on the 31st of July was that we had a problem across the fleet with our watertight integrity. Some 54% of the vehicles that were inspected had failures in the watertight integrity of their plenum doors. That's the large intakes on the front that permit air to come out in and out of an engine that's underwater. 18% had cargo hatches that were leaking in excess of what they should have been. And fully 50% had inoperable emergency escape lighting systems. There were other discrepancies as well. None of those vehicles are permitted back into the water until they are returned to operable condition. The watertight integrity testing regime has been instantiated into our technical manuals and into our technical instructions. We had not been inspecting to the level of detail necessary to determine these discrepancies. As Chairman Garamendi noted, it may have been that 20 years of landward operations have caused us to lose some of our amphibious edge. To that end, we are moving out on a detailed watertight integrity regime that will ensure that no vehicle goes in the water without being watertight and integral. You are correct about the bilge pumps. There are bilge pumps on every AAV that can expel water at a rate far greater than typically enters. AAVs leak, but the 400 and some odd gallons per minute that they can pump over the side should have been sufficient in this case. In this case, it was not. The vehicle had far greater mechanical degradation than we knew of. And when the transmission failed, the hydraulic bilge pumps failed. When the transmission failed, the engine went to idle and ceased charging the batteries. And then when the engine compartment itself filled with water, the generator failed, and effectively the vehicle was without power. We know we have things to fix, and we know we have a glide slope to 2026 when the amphibious combat vehicle will be fully operationally capable. In the meantime, we will continue to sustain and fund the AAV fleet to include finishing off the return to condition code alpha. If you think about sending a vehicle back for depot level maintenance and it's returned to you in like new condition, well, even the inspections of the RCCA vehicles noted that we have a watertight integrity issue that must be addressed. We'll make these vehicles watertight and we will not put them in the water unless they are so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gavel order is Courtney and Wilson, and then we'll have additional. I note Representative Moulton, when he spoke earlier and talked of his own experience with the AAV and the Iraqi situation, said he and his colleagues sat on top, fearing being unable to get out if they had to, if they were inside. We'll come to you, Mr. Moulton, a little later, and I suspect you'll want to talk about that. Mr. Courtney?